My brother's fiancée locked me, 9 months pregnant, in the basement during their wedding preparations because she thought I was stealing her spotlight. I nearly lost my baby trying to escape. Small towns have a way of making family dynamics feel larger than life, and in our sleepy Ohio town, my older brother, James, was practically royalty. He was the golden boy, the high school quarterback, the honor roll student, and later, the one who moved back home to take over the family business. It was as if he could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I, on the other hand, was the younger, more average sister who never sought the spotlight. I worked quietly as a teacher and married young to my husband, Todd. Our life wasn't glamorous, but it was happy. After years of trying, we were finally expecting our first child, and at 9 months pregnant, I was just counting down the days until I could hold my baby. James had recently gotten engaged to Hannah, a woman with a personality as dazzling as her Pinterest-perfect wedding boards. Everything about her screamed perfection, from the meticulously arranged wedding preparations to her immaculately curated Instagram feed. But beneath the charm, there was a layer of control that even my brother couldn't seem to defy. Hannah wanted her wedding to be perfect, and she wanted to be the only thing anyone noticed. Unfortunately, my pregnancy was an unintentional complication to her vision. It all started during one of the final wedding preparation days. The house was chaos, florists in the dining room, caterers in the kitchen, and Hannah barking instructions like a general leading troops into battle. My role that day was minimal, mainly helping my mom with seating arrangements and staying out of everyone's way. With my swollen feet propped up on a chair, I didn't think I was a threat to anyone's plans, but Hannah thought differently. At some point in the afternoon, I noticed her glaring at me across the room. She whispered something to James, who gave her a half-hearted shrug and went back to checking on the band setup. Moments later, she walked over and offered me a polite but cold smile. "Could you help me grab some decorations from the basement?" she asked sweetly. Something about her tone set off alarms in my head, but I brushed it off. I followed her down the narrow basement stairs, my hand gripping the railing for balance. When we reached the bottom, she pointed toward a stack of boxes in the corner. "There should be a box labeled reception table decor. Can you check if it's there while I grab the ribbon upstairs?" "Sure," I replied, bending carefully to avoid putting too much pressure on my belly. Before I could fully register what was happening, I heard the creak of the stairs and the heavy thud of the basement door slamming shut. I rushed toward it, my pulse racing, but by the time I reached the top, I heard the unmistakable click of the lock sliding into place. Panic bloomed in my chest like wildfire. I pounded on the door, yelling, "Hannah, what are you doing? Open the door." No answer. Just the muffled sounds of wedding preparations above. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for footsteps, for anything that might give me hope. But all I heard was Hannah's voice drifting away as she gave more orders. The basement was dim, with only a flickering overhead bulb casting eerie shadows against the concrete walls. I leaned against the door, breathing heavily, trying to calm my racing heart. My baby shifted inside me, as if sensing my distress. I rubbed my belly and whispered, "It's okay, little one. We'll get out of here." The air felt thick, like it was closing in around me. I scanned the room for a way out, windows, a phone, anything. My phone was upstairs in my purse, and the small basement window was too high and narrow for me to reach, let alone fit through at 9 months pregnant. Desperation set in. I knew I couldn't sit and wait. I had to get out. I spotted an old metal shelving unit in the corner, stacked with paint cans and tools. My eyes darted back to the window. If I could climb up, maybe I could break it and yell for help. The adrenaline coursing through me drowned out any pain or discomfort as I shuffled toward the shelves. I grabbed the edge and tried to lift myself up, but my belly made it nearly impossible to maneuver. I gritted my teeth and pulled harder, ignoring the strain on my back. Just as I managed to get one foot on the bottom shelf, the entire unit wobbled. My breath hitched, but I couldn't stop. I reached for the next shelf, my fingers barely grazing it before the shelf tilted. The crash was deafening. Paint cans toppled over me, splattering the floor. I fell backward, my legs giving out, and the impact sent a sharp pain shooting up my back. I screamed. The sound echoed through the basement, bouncing off the cold walls. My hands instinctively cradled my belly as I fought to catch my breath. The pain was blinding, stabbing through my lower back and abdomen. Something was wrong. I tried to sit up, but the weight of my belly and the pain anchoring me down made it nearly impossible. My baby kicked, stronger this time, almost frantic. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to stay calm. I didn't know how long I lay there, sobbing quietly. My only thought was my baby. I couldn't let anything happen to them. I had to keep going. With what little strength I had left, I crawled toward the staircase. My vision blurred, and each movement felt like fire tearing through my body. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I clung to the railing and tried to pull myself up. My arms trembled, my legs buckled, but I managed to make it up one step, then another. I pounded on the door again, crying out, "Please, somebody help me." Then, finally, I heard footsteps on the other side of the door. For a moment, hope flickered through me. I heard the lock turn, and relief washed over me like cool water on a scorching day. I braced myself against the door, ready to collapse into whoever was on the other side, but instead of the door swinging open, it barely cracked. Through the small opening, I saw Hannah's face, her expression sharp and composed. "Stop yelling," she hissed, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one else had noticed. "You're making a scene." I blinked, my breath ragged. "Hannah, please." "I'm in pain. Something's wrong. I need to go to the hospital." Her eyes flicked to my belly, and for a split second, I thought I saw a trace of guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You'll be fine," she said, her voice clipped. "Just stay down here for a little while longer. The rehearsal is about to start, and I can't have you out there looking like this." "Like what?" I gasped, clutching my stomach. "Like a pregnant woman? Your future sister-in-law?" "No," she said coldly. "Like someone who's trying to steal my day." The door slammed shut again, and I heard the lock click once more. My screams were muffled by the wood, my fists pounding in vain. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled beneath me. My world tilted, and before I could stop myself, I fell backward down the stairs. I barely registered the thud of my body hitting the bottom step, or the sharp crack as my head bounced against the cold floor. Pain erupted like lightning in my skull, and darkness crept into the corners of my vision. The next thing I remember was the distant sound of voices, muffled and frantic. Light pierced through the fog in my head, and my eyes fluttered open to see blurry figures standing above me. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, and my body felt like it was sinking into the cold concrete. "Hold on, honey," a voice said. It was my mom. Her face swam into focus, eyes wide with panic as she knelt beside me. Her hands hovered over my belly, unsure of what to do. "Call 911, she shouted, and I heard the sound of someone running up the stairs. My dad, maybe. I didn't care who it was, as long as they got me helped. I tried to tell her about the pain, about the fall, but the words wouldn't come out. I just stared at her, tears streaming down my face. The baby. I had to make sure the baby was okay. I grabbed her arm and managed to croak. "The baby, we've got you," she said, her voice cracking. "Just stay with me." The basement swirled around me, fading in and out as I fought to stay conscious. At some point, I heard the distant wail of sirens. Paramedics flooded the room, their hands everywhere, lifting me onto a stretcher, checking my pulse, shouting questions that I couldn't answer. "Possible placental abruption," one of them said grimly as they strapped me in and secured my head. Placental abruption. I didn't know much about it, but I knew it wasn't good. I clutched my belly, willing the baby to stay safe, to hold on just a little longer. The world tilted as they carried me up the stairs and into the back of the ambulance. As the doors slammed shut, I caught a glimpse of Hannah standing in the driveway. Her perfect updo was intact, her makeup flawless, but her face had gone pale. She looked like a ghost, as if she were watching her carefully curated world crack and crumble right in front of her. Good, I thought faintly. She should be scared. The last thing I heard before I passed out again was the paramedic's voice shouting, "We need to move, now." I woke up to the sterile glare of hospital lights above me and the sound of machines beeping in steady, rhythmic patterns. My body felt numb, as though I were floating somewhere between consciousness and sleep. I blinked, trying to piece together where I was and how I got here. Then it hit me, the basement, the fall, the baby. My heart jumped, and I instinctively tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. A nurse appeared, gently pressing me back down. "Easy," she said softly. "You've been through a lot." "The baby," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Is my baby okay?" The nurse gave me a reassuring smile. "You're both okay, but it was close. You had a partial placental abruption." We had to do an emergency C-section to save the baby. Tears welled in my eyes. Relief, fear, and exhaustion crashed over me all at once. "Where's my baby?" "She's in the NICU," the nurse said. "A little early, but she's strong. Your husband is with her now." Todd. Just hearing his name brought a fresh wave of tears. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by everything I'd been through. The nurse sat with me for a moment, rubbing my hand gently before leaving to check on the machines. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Todd rushed in, his face pale and tear-streaked. Without a word, he wrapped me in a gentle embrace, careful not to press too hard against my incision. His shoulders shook, and I realized he was crying too. "She's beautiful," he choked out. "Our little girl is beautiful." I sobbed into his shoulder, both of us holding on as if the weight of the moment could break us if we let go. After what felt like an eternity, he pulled back and cupped my face. "What happened, baby? How did this happen?" I tried to answer, but my throat tightened. The memory of the basement, the fall, and Hannah's cruel smirk replayed like a nightmare in my head. I couldn't find the words to tell him, at least, not yet. I'll tell you everything," I whispered. "But first, can I see her?" Todd nodded and kissed my forehead. "Let me tell the nurse. I'll take you as soon as you're ready." As he stepped out of the room, the weight of everything settled over me. Hannah had locked me in that basement. She almost cost me my baby, and she hadn't even flinched. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not after what she'd done. My hands clenched into fists. She had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, after I had been wheeled into the NICU to see my baby and hold her tiny hand, I felt like I had gained just enough strength to confront what lay ahead. My baby girl was perfect, so small, but breathing steadily. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, and I promised her silently that no one would ever put her life in danger again. But now, it was time to face the storm waiting outside my hospital room. When Todd wheeled me back to my room, my parents were already there. My mom's face was streaked with tears, and my dad's expression was as grim as I'd ever seen it. But the person who caught my attention was James. He stood against the wall, arms crossed, looking like a man whose entire world had been shattered. "Hannah told me what happened," he said, his voice raw. I had no idea she'd do something like this. "I'm so sorry, I swear I didn't know." I stared at him, waiting for the wave of anger to hit, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt hollow. All I could manage was a quiet, "Where is she?" James's jaw tightened. "She's gone. My parents kicked her out of the house after I told them what happened. She packed her bags this morning. She's not coming to the wedding, there isn't going to be one." His voice cracked at the last sentence, and he wiped at his eyes. "I can't believe she almost killed my niece." My mom sank into the chair next to me, sobbing into her hands. "I can't believe she would do this," she wept. "We trusted her." I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't. My heart was still racing from the memory of Hannah's face as she locked me in the basement, indifferent to my screams. My dad sat silently at the edge of the bed, his gaze fixed on the floor. Todd stood behind me, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. "We're pressing charges," he said, his voice steady but filled with fury. "I don't care how much she cries or apologizes. What she did is unforgivable." James nodded, defeated. "Do it. She deserves it." I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. I didn't feel victorious or vindicated. I just felt drained. My brother, the golden boy, stood there in pieces, and my family, who had always been so put together, was crumbling right in front of me. Then, my mom reached for my hand. "I don't care what happens next," she said through her tears. "All that matters is that you and the baby are safe. We'll stand by you. No one is ever going to hurt you like this again." I looked at her, finally letting the tears fall freely. "She tried to take everything from me," I whispered. "She thought my pregnancy was a threat to her perfect day." "Well," Todd said firmly, "her perfect day is over. And she's going to pay for what she did." I squeezed his hand, finding strength in the warmth of his touch. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about legal consequences. Hannah had fractured the trust in our family. It wasn't something that could be healed overnight. Still, I was determined to protect what mattered. My baby, my husband, and my future. No matter how broken our family felt right now, we would rebuild. Without her, and Hannah, she could rot in the mess she'd created. The days that followed were a blur of police reports, hospital visits, and quiet moments spent in the NICU with my baby girl. The doctor said she was doing well, and if she continued to gain weight and stabilize, she'd be able to come home within a few weeks. That hope was the only thing keeping me grounded. Meanwhile, Hannah's world fell apart just as quickly as she had tried to ruin mine. James cooperated fully with the authorities, handing over texts and emails that hinted at her unstable behavior leading up to the incident. She was charged with false imprisonment and reckless endangerment, and her spotless image as the perfect fiancée dissolved overnight. The wedding, of course, was officially cancelled. Invitations were recalled, vendors were notified, and deposits were lost. James tried to apologize to me every chance he got, but after a while, I had to tell him to stop. I didn't need his guilt. I needed space. My parents stayed by my side throughout everything. My mom couldn't stop crying for the first few days, repeatedly blaming herself for not seeing through Hannah's facade. I should have known, she kept saying. I should have seen what she was capable of. You couldn't have known, I told her, though part of me still struggled to believe it myself. How could none of us have seen it coming? Todd was my rock. Every time I woke up in the middle of the night, haunted by nightmares of the basement and the fall, he was there to hold me, whispering that we were safe now. That our baby girl was safe. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, when we brought our daughter home from the hospital, that I finally felt like I could breathe again. Her nursery was ready, the pale yellow walls bathed in soft light from the afternoon sun. I laid her down gently in her crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. She's strong, Todd said from behind me. Just like her mom. I smiled faintly, brushing a tear from my cheek. We're going to be okay, aren't we? We are, he said, pulling me into his arms. It's over now. But the truth was, part of it would never be over. The trust between me and my brother had been shaken to its core. James was trying, though. He checked in regularly, sent gifts for the baby, and apologized more times than I could count. I knew I'd forgive him eventually, but it would take time. As for Hannah, I hadn't heard from her directly since the day she locked me in the basement. She sent a half-hearted letter of apology through her lawyer, but I didn't even bother reading it. Whatever she had to say didn't matter. She had been cut from my life, and there was no going back. One evening, after putting the baby to bed, I sat with Todd on the porch swing, the cool Ohio breeze brushing against my skin. The stars sparkled above us, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. I almost lost everything, I whispered. But you didn't, Todd said, squeezing my hand. And now we have everything we need right here. I rested my head on his shoulder, letting the warmth of his words sink in. Life wasn't perfect, and the scars from what happened would always be there. But my family, my real family, was still standing. And that was enough.